Hello and welcome to the Met Office 10-day trend. Now, here at the Met Office, we know full well that a spell of hot, sunny weather in June isn't everyone's cup of tea. But if you enjoy blue skies at this time of year and soaring temperatures, well, you'll probably enjoy the next 4 or 5 minutes, and you will probably also enjoy the rest of June 2018, because the forecast is really quite settled, dry and sunny for most places, and yes, temperatures are set to soar, especially next week. What's going on? Well, it seems strange to be talking about hot weather and start with a cold front, but that's moving across the UK through Wednesday and Thursday. And behind that, well, say hi to this high, because it is not moving anywhere. Once it's moved in across the UK, it hangs around through the weekend and beyond. Some weather fronts drifting near northern Scotland at times. We will see a bit more cloud here, but for most, this high pressure promises sunny spells throughout the weekend and into next week. Now let's run through that same sequence, but showing the temperatures. The cold fronts through Wednesday, that clears away, and so it does turn fresher for all of us through Thursday and at first on Friday. But then the high pressure moves in, and notice how the change in the colours on the map. The golden colours turn to orange hues as we go into the early part of next week. That's when temperatures will really start to rise. But before we get there, we will have a fresher feel on Thursday. A fine day for many. There'll be some cloud bubbling up, a few showers in the far northeast. It's not completely dry, and actually quite breezy across eastern parts of Scotland. A cooler feel, especially so in the south, where temperatures have been into the mid-20s for a good part of this week. Well, 20 or 21 at best. And further north, we're only in the low to mid-teens in places. So a fresh Thursday and really quite chilly to start the day on Friday. These are some of the temperatures in the countryside. We could be well down into single figures across Scotland, and further south, again, after some really warm and humid mornings, Friday will feel very different. Of course, then the sun will get to work and those temperatures will rise through Friday, and by the afternoon those temperatures a little bit higher than Thursday's values, getting into the high teens across the north and the low 20s further south. And those temperatures will then rise day on day as we go through the weekend. So by the time we get to Saturday, we're looking at temperatures across the south into maybe the mid-20s. Notice that slightly cooler tinge around the coasts. The coast will be fresher this weekend. There'll be sea breezes, and still temperatures struggling to get to 20 degrees across parts of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. But even here by Sunday, those temperatures are set to rise, so that we'll be widely over 20 Celsius by Sunday. But as I said, these temperatures pleasant enough through the weekend. It's really next week when we'll start to see those temperatures rising. So enjoy this weekend if you don't like it too hot. There will be some sunshine, but don't forget, UV levels will be high. It's the solstice on Thursday, and that's when the UV levels are at their highest. That's when the sun is at its strongest. So do wear the sunscreen this weekend. And of course, another downside to any warm spell of weather, pollen levels will continue to be very high in places. Grass pollen levels, of course. There's plenty of advice on the Met Office website about how to deal with that, and on the NHS website as well. Now, one thing about pollen is actually it can be too hot for grass pollen. So as temperatures rise in the early part of next week, we may, in places, start to see pollen levels dropping a little bit, because temperatures are going to go beyond those mid-20s and possibly up to 30 Celsius. Look at this hot air across Spain and Portugal, and it just wafts its way in the early part of next week more widely across the UK. And it is looking quite widespread, this very warm spell of weather into the early part of next week. We're not just talking about certain areas. Pretty much all parts of the UK are going to see temperatures well above average. And yes, some places next week are set to reach 30 degrees Celsius. Now, this is an example of how the temperatures will be changing over the next few days. This graph is for Birmingham in particular, and it shows the temperatures, the maximum temperatures in red and the minimum overnight temperatures in blue. Now, this is the trend through this week and then into next week, the days along the bottom there. And you can see that after it turns a little cooler on Thursday, those temperatures are then going to rise throughout next week. Now, the bigger the blob here, the more the uncertainty. So as we get towards the end of next week, those blobs do get bigger. But notice, even though there's more uncertainty, those temperatures are still above the average for the time of year, which is this red line here. So temperatures are set to be well above average across the UK for much of next week. I also want to point out the minimum temperatures as well, because that is another downside of this spell of weather. Yes, it turns a little fresher overnight Thursday and Friday, but look at these overnight temperatures set to rise again. So it's going to get more and more uncomfortable for sleeping as we go into next week. And yes, the weather patterns are not really changing too much apart from the rising temperatures next week. The high pressure is still with us. The big question marks about next week is just the position of this high, because it makes a big difference as to which way the wind is blowing, and that makes a big difference to the feel of things. If the high pressure starts to head its way further east, then that will change just how high the temperatures get. If the high pressure stays to the north of the UK, for example, then the winds coming round the high will tend to be dragged in more from the east or the northeast. And so, although it will be very warm still, because there'll be plenty of sunshine, well, temperatures won't be as high as if the high moves its way further east. And in this scenario, well, the temperatures will really start to soar because we'll draw in the air from further south. So hot air coming up from the Mediterranean. That's the scenario that could see temperatures really start to sizzle next week. So that is something we'll be keeping a close eye on. But overall, with high pressure in control, the sunny weather is set to last. Not great news for gardeners, of course. It's been a very dry month, and that is going to continue. The big question mark is just exactly how hot. Well, that will depend somewhat on the wind direction. So stay tuned to the Met Office, because it's going to be a busy few days ahead. And as I said earlier, there's plenty of advice on handling hot weather, pollen levels, and more on UV on the Met Office website and through our partners on the NHS as well.